Hey guys, welcome back into Legacy. So today I'm going to hit up, as the splash screen here will show, I'm going to hit up another game. I am going to keep doing my deep dive on Dragon Warriors, but I'm going to kind of split it up with some other stuff in between, so it's not a constant barrage of just Dragon Warriors. And today I'm going to talk about another game that I absolutely adore. Played a little bit of it. It's really hard to find games of this. And that's Ars Magica. If you're not familiar with Ars Magica, I hope to introduce you to another game that is absolutely wonderful, great fantasy game. Um, and I'm going to address a couple things real quick so you guys know. One, I'm not going to do the camera right now because my lighting in this room just sucks. Um, that being said, guys, I apologize. I am working on trying to figure out how to get that fixed. I'm not 100% sure how that's going to work out. I may want to have to break down and get a lighting rig for streaming. I don't know yet. Um, some other reasons as well. Um, that being said, guys, that just so you guys know, for now I'm not going to do the camera, um, and I will get back to it when I figure out the lighting situation. But anyways, guys, talking about Ars Magica. What is Ars Magica? What is this game? That I'm going to bet the majority of people who visit this channel have never heard of, or if they have heard of it, they kind of heard of it in passing. They don't know a lot about it, what Ars Magic is, how it plays, the basics of it. I'm not going to deep dive this game, at least not right now. I'm not going to do what I'm going to do with Dragon Wars with this game. One, because I think this game's a little more complicated. Just doing a rules video on this can get very, very complicated. Doing like character creation videos on this is very complicated uh, because of the way that the system plays. You'll understand when I get more into it. But that being said, Ars Magica stands for Art of Magic, the Art of Magic. It is set in a 12th to 13th century mythic Europe, where everything you can think of from mythic Europe, what they call the European paradigm, is real. Demons run crops, angels protect the righteous, uh, fairies kidnap children, dragons are real. If you can think of it um, from the European era of 12th to 13th century Europe, it is a realistic thing. It happens in this game. Um, the politics of Europe are pretty much identical to the politics as they would be written in history books. The mundane politics are, anyways. When I say mundane, you'll understand in a minute. Because this game focuses on magi or maguses, um, and the casters are the primary focus of the game, but they're not the only focus of the game. And I wanted to introduce this game the way it should be introduced, and I'm going to give you the great big overview of what this game was, where it comes from. Do the same thing I kind of did with Dragon Warriors, give you an idea where it comes from, where it sits today. I will provide a link to where you can purchase it from the producer. You can also get, I believe, get the PDFs on Drive-Thru RPG. I'm not going to link the Drive-Thru RPG link. I'm going to link the actual Atlas Games link. Um, that being said, guys, real quick. So, where did Ars Magica come from? So, Ars Magica was originally published in 1987 by a company called Lion Rampart Games. Lion Rampart Games was a very small company. Uh, really, this is the only game that I know of that they published. What they would go on to become is more important than what they were. In '91, they actually merged with the White Wolf magazine to create White Wolf Games. So, White Wolf Game Studio. So, they actually produced an edition of this game. Believe it was the second edition or third edition, second and third edition of this game. Uh, and it was published in '91 and through '94. It was published through White Wolf. In fact, a lot of the parts of this game would go on to influence World of Darkness pretty heavily, specifically Mage the Ascension, um, to be very specific about it. This game would become a very functional part of that design process. Um, they expanded settings, they changed some of the rules, kept the core system, um, and basically created uh, the majority of what would become later editions. 94 company gets sold, the rights get sold to Wizards of the Coast. They basically produce a handful of books, just a handful of books. Um, and decided to exit the RPG industry space, which is ironic considering who Wizards of the Coast is today. And that's just how it was. And lo and behold, that happened. Wham! We're in 94. 95, it gets published, sold to Atlas Games to be published. They create a new edition, 4th edition, um, which actually wins the Origin Award in 96 for Best Role Playing Game. So they create new stories, they expand materials, they do all the cool stuff in 95, 94, 95, 96, up to 2004 when they begin the process of releasing 5th edition, which is the edition they are currently on. Um, it made extensive changes to the system. Combat was changed, experience, character creation, um, all those things were changed. Again, won the Origin Award for Best Role Playing Game. You can get the 4th edition free through Warehouse 23, or you used to be able to. I'm not going to swear by that anymore. Through Warehouse 23, you can check that out. If you know where Warehouse 23 is, it's fronted by Steve Jackson Games. Um, and then, as of 2024, they had announced they're doing what's called 5th edition definitive. It is basically going to be everything in 5th edition, all the errata, everything for 5th edition into a new book. It is going to be expensive, guys. I already looked up the price. It's going to be about $160. It is not going to be cheap to get the definitive. So just keep that in mind. 5th edition is still fully functional. That's the setting or the edition I primarily played. So there you go. Okay, so that's a little bit of the history of Ars Magica. Where did it come from? It's a very simple story. I mean, really it is. 87 gets created. 2004 is the latest edition. And technically, it's not going into a new edition. It's going into a revision of the previous edition, of the existing edition. So it's still 5th edition, which, by the way, also tells you how functional the system itself is, and that they have not had to touch this edition in over 20 years. Realistically, they have not had to do anything major to it in 20 years. Okay, that being said, so um, the setting for Ars Magica, as I mentioned, is 12th and 13th century Europe, called Mythic Europe. So this is a world that you already kind of know. If you're a history nerd, if you like the Dark Ages, if you like that era of history, um, you know, the medieval, uh, aesthetic, you know this world. And you know this world because you kind of have already been able to, and you're currently able to pull up a web browser, look up the political situation, and say Rome in 1150, and you will be reading the same history as what is used in Mythic Europe as far as mundane politics, mundane situations. Um, those things are all real. How the papacy worked, all of that stuff is the same. Where it gets different is, as I said, the medieval paradigm, what they call the medieval paradigm, things that you can imagine uh, from that era, things that were written in poems and stories and mythology are all very real. Goblins exist, elves still babies, demons oppress people, uh, angels protect people, the divine is very real. Uh, the church is growing. The Muslim world is expanding. All those things are very real. Uh, so that is very much the setting, the core setting. Um, so the core setting is very simplistic as far as where it's set in the world. Um, Europe, it does touch a little bit on Leviant, uh, but a lot of people play within Europe itself. I've seen several campaigns mentioned online that run in France, Germany. We played Novgorod, which is in Russia, and Poland, the Russian Polish, kind of that area of Europe. It's actually a fairly large area to cover. But so that's the basics of the setting. Now, the setting gets kind of weird. It gets a little bit unique, and that you're playing a different type of RPG here, and I'm going to explain this part because it's going to make explaining the game a little simpler. This is the game that is credited as creating what's called the troop style role playing style. Um, in that characters in Ars Magica are not one character. You will play multiple characters in this game. Generally speaking, the way that this works is you create one magi, generally, not no need more than one magi. You typically create somewhere between 2 and 3 what are called companions, which are highly skilled assistants. They help do things that the magi can't do for themselves. And then you have a communal group of PCs called grogs. Grogs are your stereotypical peasant type characters. They are the sword arm in your army. They are your bodyguards. That's what they are. They are, they're the stable boy is a grog. Um, so and what happens in this game is you alternate playing different characters based on the situation and need for the story arc part you're in. So a bad guy spends a lot of time in study, research, laboratory. He's looking up new spells. He's educating himself. He's inventing new spells, new enchantments. And so you'll find yourself playing your magi for a couple of sessions where he has to go out on an adventure and do something, maybe go to a tribunal or go to a meeting. And then you'll play your companion for several sessions because the magi is in his laboratory doing, maga stuff. Um, and that's what happens. So what these magi do is they've created what are called covenants. Covenants are basically they are strongholds of power where multiple magi have agreed to live in peace with each other. They're built in what are called places of power. Uh, each region has different places of power, which are called tribunals. Tribunals tend to be wider, larger areas, whereas covenants take up a little less area. Covenants can actually spread over multiple tribunals if you're not careful about where you place them. So you got to be kind of careful with that. The covenant, uh, honestly, the covenant is a little bit like the house in Song of Ice and Fire, in that the covenant becomes almost a living character. It becomes part of the story. It becomes part of what the game's about. The development of your covenant is important. So that again, that's the basics of living in Ars Magica. Guys, and I promise I'm trying not to get too deep into the weeds with this, but this game can be a little complicated, so I apologize if this video goes a little long or seems a little convoluted. Okay, so the Magi themselves, they come along, um, and there are two people, Trianoma and Bonsagus, who uh, are uh, from a cult uh, called the Cult of Mercury. They base their rules off of Hermetic magic, which is from the deity Hermes. Again, not going to get too deep into the weeds on that. That happens in about 767 AD. They they took a bunch of disparate gifted humans and began basically they created rules of conduct for the gifted, for the magi. The magi, uh, they allowed themselves to be created, to be kind of shaped this way. The first tribunal, the first meeting, basically they agree to these rules. They created what are called 12 houses. There's different houses of magic. Again, I'm not going to delve too deep into the houses. Just know there's 12 different houses of magic, of magic education. And basically, once you join the order, you are apprenticed to a member of one of those houses. They will teach you magic from the perspective of that house. So, um, magi who really don't want to be part of the order don't last long. The order tends to kill them because they're dangerous. Um, so, like I said, you get your tribunals um, once every sorry, once every so many years. It's every 7 years. There is a tribunal that holds. It's a tribunal uh, for each of the magi within the tribunal. There's a meeting. You don't have to go uh, unless you have to go for like specific procedures, like your apprentice going up to full magi, things like that. Um, if you need somebody to judge a dispute between different maguses, magi, uh, and then every 33 years, the tribunal selects one person to go to what's called the Grand Tribunal in the Black Forest so that you can get that done. And like I said, the tribunals they correspond to groupings of portions of modern nations. It's got a distinct culture and flavor. Um, there are books in the line that describe certain tribunals. Not all of them have their own books, but several of them do. They're really, really good books, by the way. And each one has, uh, its own plot line, its own politics, its own, cultural events that go on. So, you know, um, so just as an example, uh, here are a couple of the tribunals: Normandy, Roman, Theban, Transylvanian, the Rhine, the Novgorod. Uh, so those are just a couple of the tribunals. There are lots of them. Um, so you know, tribunals, like I said, tribunals set their own boundaries. They're pretty clearly defined, but covenants, depending on how you set up your covenant, can actually cross tribunal lines because there is a tribunal in northern France, there's a tribunal in southern France, and if you set up in the wrong spot, you can accidentally cross into one or the other. And there are actually rules for how that works because the politics between those tribunals is totally different. So it's going to impact the way your covenant actually works, how your group works. Okay, that's like I said, guys. I know I'm kind of leaning a lot how here. Okay, and then one of the other cool things with Ars Magica is there's different realms of power that can be exerted on mankind. The divine realm, exactly what it sounds like. Angels, God, uh, holy miracles. Those are all part of the divine realm. Divine realm actually uh, will push out anything that's not part of the divine realm. It can actually reduce the magical effects around it. It is very powerful, and it is a lack of a better way of putting it. Divine and infernal are both kind of forces of nature. For a lack of a better way of putting it, they exist independent of mankind, but the divine is expanding because the Abrahamic religions are expanding at this time. Christendom has taken over Europe. The Holy Roman Empire is still active. There's a lot of things like that. Muslim nations have begun expanding as well. So Islam has begun to expand, which is part of the divine as well. So keep that in mind when people talk, if you want to know more about the divine realm. Again, there's books on this within the line. You can read just about these realms. The infernal realm, again, opposite of the divine realm: Satan, demons, uh, illnesses, bad smells. Um, so they do anything that can be attributed to severely negative effects in the world tends to come from the infernal. Babies die suddenly, it's infernal. Crops fell unexpectedly, it's infernal. Uh, and again, infernal, uh, it's just how it is. It affects all of the realms that are not attuned to it. So, infernal power diminishes divine power, but it also diminishes magical power. It does very similar things to divine power. The fairy realm, again, makes sense. It's the creatures of stereotypical fairy tales. This is where you're going to get elves and dwarves and goblins and redcaps and all of those things. Fairy realm is not forbidden to the magus. Uh, you can work and sometimes need to work with the fairy realm to resolve issues because the fairy realm has unique perspectives or unique ability to resolve things. Uh, you just are not allowed to purposely piss them off um, because they can do some pretty awful things. And then the last realm you deal with, of course, is the realm of magic, which is where the game gets a lot of its ideals from. The idea of magic, magi, the idea of being a magus. It's very magic and fairy uh, kind of reflect each other. Um, so they're kind of similar to each other, and it's pretty awesome. Okay, so that's the basics of the system of the setting, guys. The setting is pretty detailed in and of itself. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to go through a couple of the system parts of it. I'm not going to delve too deep in the system because the system is, like I say, it can be very complicated. The basic system is very simple. Your stats are rated from -5 to +5, with 0 being average. You roll a d10, you add your ability plus your characteristic, uh, opposed to a difficulty number. It literally is that simple. That is the base mechanic of the game for everything you will do. There is a mechanic. Don't want to delve too much into it because, like I said, this is a deep dive part called stress roll. Stress roll, instead of being 1 to 10 on a die like normal, it's 0 to 9. If you roll a 1 on that stress roll, you roll again and then you double. Um, so if you roll multiple ones in a row, you double it each time, redoubling the result. So you could get some ridiculous results off of stress rolls. And then a 0 is also re-rolled uh, as a botch roll. Um, if you botch, you roll a 0 again after rolling a 0, the action has been botched. It's disastrous. Yada yada yada. Otherwise, it merely equals 0, and you just fail. Pretty common sense. Botching is actually pretty difficult in the system. The heart of this game is the magic system. Um, Again, I'm not going to get too deep into it because I don't want to delve into the like finer detail points. It has what are called 15 arts. They're divided into techniques and forms. There's 5 techniques, 10 forms. They use Latin terms to describe them. And it is done in a noun verb or verb noun system. So what they will do is they will describe it as you want to create fire. You will use a very specific set. Um, I said I'm not going to get into all of them, but as an example, the one I just used, I want to create a fire. You would use creo. I believe it is ignum. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, creo ignum would be the magic combination you use to create fire or heat. Um, so, and like I said, uh, each one of these governs a very specific part of magical creation, magical uh, functionality. So, uh, just to give you another example, uh, if you want, I just used creation, but you could do something like, oh, I want to scry on somebody. You would use intelligo, which is I perceive, and then you would go on to the forms. And again, I'm not going to get into all the different because there's so many of them, but basically they try to categorize them as tightly as they can. Animal affects animals, living creatures. Aquam is water. Like ignum is fire. And then the one that's most interesting to me, of course, is whim or power itself. Um, so when you mess with whim, you are literally messing with the essence of magic itself. So, and the way you cast magic is pretty much the same as you're going to do anything else. It has a difficulty number to cast the spell. You're going to roll your art plus your form plus your technique plus a d10, trying to beat the difficulty number. It's not really any different. Last thing that really needs to be talked about, just so you guys know a little more about it, character advancement. It's done with experience, guys. There's different ways to get experience. I'm not going to delve deep into it. Um, you can gain experience through exposure to things, through practice, through training, and through study. The reason those are important is because a lot of the time, like I said, your Magus is not on an adventure. He's getting experience through study. Exposure would be uh, having spells cast on you, for example, would expose you to it, or having knowledge used against you, or having to look something up in a library would be an exposure. Uh, Training would be casting spells repetitively. Those are all examples. Uh, and just like any other game, you spend experience to do it. You're going to spend experience. The higher your stat line goes, higher your characteristic goes, the higher your attribute goes, the higher your form and techniques go, the more expensive it becomes. I mean, those are just common sense things. Uh, and like I said, guys, this is a incredibly well developed game, well well received game. Like I said, doesn't see a lot of play. A lot of people are turned off by the troop style concept. I'm not. I happen to enjoy it quite a bit. Like I said, you can get, I believe, everything um, through drive-through and PDF, and I'm fairly sure they have most of the books available on their website for hard copies. Um, so these guys have been well received over the years, and I really, really hope. Like I said, I know this video is a little longer than I kind of wanted it to be because I try to keep these videos closer to 20 minutes. It's closer to 30. There's a lot to this game. I was trying to give you the overview without diving into the deep weeds of the game system, because the game system is so complicated at times. Just know this is a game worth checking out if you're looking for a great game that requires you to think through and play and concentrate on developing a group dynamic versus individual character dynamic. This is a great game for that. Uh, it really does scratch an itch for people who are looking for a game that requires a lot of thought and creativity. That's for sure. So, all that being said, guys, seriously consider checking out Ars Magica. Like I said, I'll drop the link to the Atlas page in the description. Please, 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 please consider checking out this game. It is worth your time. It really is. I love it. I would love to play more of it. I'd love to run it a little bit. This is not a game that you just pick up and run, though. This is a game you got to have a group that's really kind of sold on. Uh, all that being said, guys, we hope to see you guys around the game table, and we do hope you guys keep having fun.